Are you looking to publish your book, but you don't know where to start? You may have heard about self-publishing, and it sounds easy, but you wonder how it really works, and if it really works. Hi, my name is Patricia Marshall, and I'm the founder of Luminary Press. Many authors I talk to have asked me the same questions. How do I go about this self-publishing process? How does it work? And most importantly, how can I ensure that my book is done right? They're book people, and they wonder, it's a book, how hard can it be? But savvy authors understand what they don't know. Maybe they've seen self-published books that seem amateurish, and they're worried about getting similar results for their efforts. Good book design is hard to explain. Creating a book is far more complex than it might seem, but with the right help, it's possible to produce a book you can be proud of. I've spent the last 10 years walking hundreds of authors through the process. I really enjoy sharing what I know with both my clients at Luminary Press and with authors who are doing it themselves. Because nothing is sadder to me than when an author comes and shows me a book that's been obviously self-published. Then they tell me they need help marketing it, or they don't know why bookstore owners aren't interested. When they do that, I have to tell them it's going to be a hard sell because someone gave them bad advice or because they just didn't know what they were doing during the process. It really doesn't matter how great their writing is. If the book has a bad cover, if it's an odd size or it's riddled with errors, it's simply not going to sell. Imagine, instead, if you had the tools to turn the manuscript you've been working on for so long into a book that looks like it belongs on the shelves next to best-selling authors. One that has a great chance of getting some recognition, and that won't have critics sniping about issues that are out of your control. That's what our clients experience. Most of them found the process of publishing daunting, but we took it step by step to understand what they were doing along the way. In this seminar, I want to share that information with you. I'm going to walk you through a process that is very similar to the one we take our clients through. I call this seminar 6 Steps to Successful Self-Publishing because I believe that in order to be successful, you have to have a strong product. And make no doubt, even though you think of your writing as a labor of love or a work of art, once you create a book, it's a product, a commodity that you want to sell to the masses. And just as if you were building a bookshelf, sewing a jacket, or painting a landscape, the work you put into learning your craft will shine through, but you're going to be judged on the final presentation. It's no different with a book. The final product should reflect the love and knowledge and care you put into writing it. So let's get started with an overview of the bookmaking process. Be sure to stick around at the end when I'll give you links to more resources and a chance to check in with me if you have questions. I'm guessing you will, and I don't want to leave you hanging. Right now, let me show you what we're going to cover in the next half hour or so. I'm going to give you an overview of the print-on-demand publishing process. We'll talk about getting your manuscript ready, editing it, and cleaning up your text. Your interior book design and layout, your cover design, printing and distribution, and finally, marketing your book. Let's start with a brief overview of how the publishing process happens. Print-on-demand books are published from files that the author or publisher submits to a printer. To publish a print book, you're going to have to create and then upload 2 files to a print-on-demand printer, the interior, which is the body of the book, and a cover file, which will include the back cover and spine. So those are both high-quality PDFs that you're going to need. Most print-on-demand books are printed through KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, which is Amazon's print-on-demand arm, or through Ingram Spark, which is associated with Ingram Content Group. Both these companies will print and distribute your book, and that means you'll be able to order copies for your own use through them. You'll see the book on online retail sites like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and you'll be able to direct booksellers to them for wholesale pricing, and that is true for both sites. Ebooks are distributed from files that the author provides to ebook distributors. To publish an ebook, you'll need to format your document as an HTML file, then convert it to an EPUB according to ebook standards. You'll have to create a cover file, and in this case you need the front only, and then you'll upload your cover and interior file to ebook distribution sites. Now, both KDP and Ingram are places where you can distribute your ebook, but there are several other options also. We'll talk about those a little bit later. For both formats, for both the ebook and the print book, all of the elements, the editing, the cover design, the text formatting, all of them need attention, and they need to be in the best shape they can be in order to conform to both the reader and the industry standards. Also, for both formats, to make sure the book is discoverable and therefore saleable, you're going to have to ensure that the proper metadata is in place, which means you'll register your book at Bowker's, which they'll give you an ISBN, you'll have a barcode, you'll set the retail price, and make sure that your book description, keywords, and channels are set up properly. And finally, along with publishing, you need to think about marketing your book. So we'll talk about giving you a basic understanding of that and where to get started with that. So let's talk about editing your manuscript. You want to make sure that your manuscript is in the best shape it can be before it's published, which means you're going to write, revise, and repeat. Any author who's written knows this. Once your manuscript is ready to go, you need to consider how you're going to get it edited. Now, most writers need to have a copy edit at a minimum. And this is really important because copy editing is a step of kind of paying attention to the minutia of the text. And when you're in the process of writing, you're really not doing that. So you need to find somebody who can give you a copy edit. And I suggest strongly that you consider hiring a copy editor, because having a friend or a family member do it is not going to always be as effective as you'd like. So if you're hiring a copy editor, you may look for somebody who's familiar with your genre and, has a background in editing the type of writing you do. It's not imperative, but it can be beneficial to work with somebody who knows what you're doing. So if you're writing a business book, it might be helpful to have a business writer. If you've written a romance, it might be helpful to have a romance writer. But a good copy editor should be able to cross genres pretty well. But a few things to consider when you're hiring one. First of all, you need to agree on the scope of work. You need to know that they're doing copy editing and what type they're doing. And to do that, it's really helpful to ask for a sample. Most copy editors will do that at no charge. And if they don't, even if it's a small fee, it's probably worth it to work that out before they do the whole book. Don't be afraid to let them know if the sample doesn't meet your expectations. Copy editing can be very subjective, and you want to make sure that you're getting the work that you're paying for, that you want for your book. You also need to agree on a format for the markup. Most editors will do it electronically, but there are still some who do it by hand. So once your manuscript is edited, you're going to go through and review the edits. You're going to accept or reject them or enter them in your document depending on how the editing was done. You also need to consider that your document needs to be formatted for the design program. And that means that's something a lot of us don't think about, but you need to remove invisible characters like double spaces. You only want one space at the end of a sentence. You don't want extra paragraph returns. You don't want extra tabs. You just need to make sure that those things are taken care of. You may not be comfortable doing this. You could ask your copy editor to do it, but again, that would be something that you would talk about ahead of time before you hired them to do the work. Once your manuscript is ready, it's copy edited, you've made the changes, you've formatted it, and it's ready to go, you can move on to layout. Before you start the layout, you're going to have to think about the book specs. That includes things like the book dimensions. Most novels or memoirs are going to be standard sizes, and print on demand has its own requirements too. So you need to kind of look at what's common. But 5x8, 5x8, 6x9 are all going to be pretty standard sizes. Don't pick an unusual size. Don't think, I'll make a square novel and make it stand out. It's just going to look weird if you do that. If you're publishing another type of book, like an art book or a poetry book or something like that, it might be a different size, but you want to check with your printers to see what sizes are available before you start the layout. So you don't want to lay something out that you find out that you can't print. You're going to have to determine a binding type. Now, a perfect bound book, which is just a paperback, is the most common. But there are other types. You can do hardback with print on demand. Ingram Spark does that. But I think it's really hard to do things like coil bound or anything like that. You're also going to have to determine the interior. A color or black and white interior are going to be your main choices here. You want to stick to black and white interior if at all possible. Color images or color pages will increase the cost of your book. And for print on demand, the entire interior will be printed in color on glossy paper if you have just one image. So you don't have an option of like putting a leaf in the middle with color pictures and having the rest of it be black and white. So black and white is going to be your least expensive option, and you should really try and stick with that. So this is the perfect segue into interior layout. First thing, I want to talk about a book page. A book page is deceptively simple. There's a lot of art that goes into it, but most of it's not noticeable unless it's absent. It's worth paying attention to the elements to make up the page of a book so that your book doesn't stand out to be difficult to read, sloppy, or just plain off. So I'm going to show you a slide in a minute that'll cover the header, footer, folio, which is the page number, and the text, and some obvious things to look at. But you also want to think about your font selection. You don't want to use Times New Roman or a sans serif font. Times New Roman is a great font. I actually write in Times New Roman, but it's a newspaper font. It's not good for layout because it's really condensed, and it's a sure tell of a self-published book if you see Times New Roman inside. Good choices for font are three simple ones we tend to stick with: Garamond, Palantino, Minion Pro. Any of those will work really well for your book. And you really should keep it at a 12-point font. Those things are important. If you make it bigger, it's going to look like a large reader book, and unless you're going for that effect, that's really not what you want to do. And if you make it a lot smaller, it's going to be crowded and difficult to read. So let me show you the book page that I have here. This is a header, and you can see the author name up here. This is a footer, and in the case of this book, we used both a header and footer, putting the folio or page number on the bottom. Now, I want you to notice that we don't have the title of the book over here, though on a page that does not start a chapter, we do. So a normal page has Rick Norris here and the title of his book here. On a chapter opening page, you do not want a header on there. So make sure that you either drop it to the bottom or just get rid of it if that's a chapter opener page. A couple other things. I'm not quite sure what this font is, but it's 12-point. Notice that we don't have ragged margins on the side. So you want your body text to be justified on both sides. It's called right justify. You want nice square text. Your opening text usually has styles a little differently. In this case, they put a drop cap here. This is the chapter name and little icon that we used in the case of this book. The last thing I want to point out here is that you need to make sure that you paginate correctly. Odd numbers start on the right, even numbers on the left. If you have a blank page, it does not have a number. The pagination of the book will start with your first chapter or sometimes an introduction or preface. So you're going to pay attention to your pagination, but if you got this wrong and had your odd number pages here and your even pages here, it's a flag, and the printer will not accept it if the pagination is off. The next question is, how do you get this professional interior? There are a couple ways to do it. There's DIY options. So you can download Word templates and use them. You can use online programs. Vellum is one I like. I think it works best with Mac though, and not with PCs, although they might have some workarounds for that. But it does a pretty decent job, though it has some limited options. You can hire a designer. Most designers are going to use InDesign, which is a professional layout program and really, I think, handles the text a little more elegantly. So it's something to think about. Word can do a decent job, Vellum can do a decent job. InDesign is probably going to do a better job than any of them. I don't recommend that you try and learn InDesign. It's a deep program, the learning curve is steep, and you're probably better off spending your time learning how to market your book or getting started on those things. But you can get someone to do an interior layout for you, and it shouldn't be too expensive. I want to show you an example of what I'm talking about here. So this was a client who came to us with a book. It was an unusual size, and you'll see why in a minute. It was 8.5 by 11. And she said to me, I have all the text laid out. I just need you to put the images in and publish it. And this is what she gave us. This is the page she gave us. And you can see there's a few things odd with it. Her name's on the top, the numbers on the bottom. It's laid out without gutter margins in here, so it should be a little wider on this side. The text should be offset a little bit. But it's also just kind of ho-hum. It's not very interesting or easy to read. It looks a little bit like a term paper. So we asked her if we could play around with it in InDesign, and she said yes. So here's what the page looked like with the layout in InDesign. Now, a couple things I want you to notice here. We were able to use color because she has color images in there, so we took advantage of that and did the footer in color and the title. This is the same information laid out like this that is here. So you can see it looks more condensed on the InDesign layout, but it also has some more breathing room. So those are things that you kind of need to think about. Like her book page doesn't look bad, but it looks like a DIY book page. And fortunately, she let us do this. I'm going to show you real quick what her layout looked like. So here it is with the images. I didn't have a spine shadow on this one, but the middle of the book would be right about here. With that, we're going to take a pause and talk about covers. So aside from copy editing, cover design is probably the most important part of the bookmaking process. Claire Last, who's the designer here at Luminary Press, is here today to talk about that. Hi, Claire.
Hi.
So why is cover design so important?
Well, it's the first impression your readers get of your book. So whether it's on a bookshelf or if it's this small as a thumbnail with an online retailer, they're just going to scroll on by because they can tell the difference between a self-published book and a professionally designed book. So
Yeah.
They will judge your book by its cover. Absolutely.
Yes, they do. So if you were if you were a first-time author, what should you be taking into consideration when you're thinking about your cover design?
I think one thing that's sort of a misconception is that your cover design is not just the image. The image might just be the background graphic, but you need to be thinking about the three facets of your book cover, and that's the three parts of front cover, spine, back cover, and for each of those, there are many components that they're going to need to think about.
So in general, what is on each of those pieces, the cover, the spine, and the back?
Well, just briefly, the front cover is going to be your title, your author name, maybe a testimonial, subtitle if you've got one. Your spine is your title, author name, maybe your imprint logo, maybe just the icon. And your back cover, you have a few options, but you're going to want to leverage any testimonials you might have. It's always better for somebody else to say nice things about you than to have to toot your own horn. Your book description, obviously, and your author bio and photo, which that's optional. You could, if there's not enough real estate on your back cover and you'd rather use it for, a long book description or say an excerpt, you can opt to put it in your interior instead. You also want to leave room for the barcode and your ISBN number and your retail price. And again, that's a great place to include your author website, domain name, and your publishing in print.
Yeah.
Again,
It is. It's valuable real estate, that back cover text.
Yeah.
And you want to be careful not to squander that, because it's, picture somebody picking up your book in a store. They're going to look at the cover. That's what's going to make them pick it up. They're going to flip it over. That's what's going to make them buy it.
Yeah.
So I've had that experience where people have come to us and said, "Hey, I've got my cover," but what they really have is an image, which of course, as Claire just explained, is not the cover. If they don't have an image, what do you advise? Where can they get one? Like, can you just go online and grab one? And
is that a trick question?
That was totally a trick question. I know the answer to that is
she knows
no,
better, yes.
But I'll let Claire explain.
Yes, that is one of the most common mistakes I see, is that a lot of authors will seek out an image that they just found in a Google search, without realizing that not only will that image not be sufficiently sized for print, most web images are 72 dpi, and printers require at least 300. But there might be legality issues as far as usage or terms of use. So unless you're really carefully finding something that's large and in public domain, you don't have the rights to use that image. So
what do you recommend to people? Where can they find images?
Well, the best starting place, unless you want to support a local artist, it's going to be more cost effective to start by searching online with some stock image companies. So you can have the usage rights managed by several companies. There's tons of them out there. There's Shutterstock, 123RF,
right,
Alamy, Getty, Creative Market. There's tons of them out there, and they let you download a small watermarked version of the image, so you can try it out. And they give you get to download that for free. Decide if you like it,
and you can download several of them, right?
Yeah, if you want to try a few different options,
because sometimes you don't know what your image is going to look like until you see it on the canvas.
You don't know till you have the title all laid out on there, whether or not you love it. That way you get to try it on for size, and then purchase the high res version, which it could be $25 an image with some of these sites.
Right. So be careful when you're looking at images. You don't want to get attached to something that's super expensive. So check the pricing as you're going along. And I always tell people, try and stay on the $25 side or the $50 side. Don't go over to the $300 or $400 sides. So once an author has all the imagery and the elements together, what happens after that?
Well, then the design process starts. My favorite part,
the fun part. When you are seeing books from a design side, like what are some of the big mistakes that you see authors make when they are designing their own cover?
I think there are a few tells that something's been that looks self-published or unprofessional. A lot of people, we already talked about the low resolution image that might look pixelated or blurry. Another thing I see is too many filters or gradients applied. One big thing is too many fonts in use. My rule of thumb is maybe only 2 font families, and to make sure those are really legible, and not too elaborate, and something that really holds up. The weight of it really holds up, no matter how big the cover is being seen. And also, I think one big thing is trying to pack too many images in, or one big concept in, to where it doesn't have to be a postcard of your whole plot line. I think it's really effective to show just one image and or maybe a close-up of one part of something, and this is your opportunity to just get the essence of the story, not tell the whole story on the cover.
Right.
So
I've had people come to me and say, "Oh, but we've got to have the bridge in there. We've got to have the bar. We've got to have the dead guy. We've got to have the ghost in the corner." And what I think the end result is sort of a mismatch. It's hard to tell what is going on in the book.
It's too much visual information, and it just adds to to clutter.
Yeah, and
think
it's the same with wordplay. Like when people want to put puns or they want to put something on, and a lot of times it's something like they know about the story, and so they want to kind of put that on the cover too because it's funny or it's clever or it's something. But you have to remember your reader doesn't know that stuff, so your reader doesn't know it, and it might just be like really confusing to the reader, which is a good reason for them not to want to pick your book up.
So it's all about first impressions.
It's all about first impressions.
You only have a minute, a second, maybe to tell just something
tell
really
that
briefly.
story.
Yeah.
And one thing we didn't talk about, I don't think yet, but it's really important that your book look like other books in the genre. So, you can pick up a book and tell whether it's a horror book or a romance or a dystopian futuristic novel. And there's a lot of creativity within those genres, but you don't want your book to be a horror story that looks like a romance.
Right.
That would be a big mistake.
On site, a reader should be able to tell what genre you're in. Absolutely. Yeah. And this is actually kind of brings us to our next thing I wanted to cover. But before you even start this process, absolutely go to a bookstore and look at other books in your genre and see what's jumping out at you, and what you find effective.
Yeah. So Claire, I know how you go about designing covers, but I remember the first one you ever did for Luminary Press, and it's still one of my favorite covers. But what advice would you give to somebody who was looking to hire a designer?
Yeah, I think, it would be really important to me to actually work with a designer that was familiar with working on book covers specifically. I think there's a lot of little peccadilles that are specific just to this niche of design, protocol processes, especially with the print-on-demand printers. It can be a little dizzying to navigate their needs.
Right, and even if somebody is like a long-time, well-respected designer, designing a book cover has its own special needs, which are a lot of the things we've been talking about right now.
It's its own animal, for sure.
Yeah.
And if you're looking to hire a designer, I think the more specific direction you can give, while still letting them bring their talents to the table is really helpful. So, for example, I love when we get examples of covers that authors like, or when they state or don't like. And when they state a color preference or colors they know they don't like, all of that are great. That's a great starting place. For me. And it's a time saver, which means
it's a money saver.
Save money, in the long run.
So something I've noticed with a lot of self-published books is that because the author is so familiar with their books, so they have good ideas for the cover. They have a cover that they've been that's been pulling them through the whole time they've been writing the book, and they put it together. And sometimes they use it for their book, but they're usually not quite there if the author's done it themselves. However, it's a really handy thing to send to a designer. Wouldn't you say? I mean, if you saw something, you could go through and kind of rearrange the typography and the pictures and the images and make that into a professional file. Yeah,
it's like you're making a rough sketch and your designer can take it the other, 20%. But,
exactly.
And make that, have that mock-up as a reference to make it into something professional and great. So, but those concepts at the core of it that you have are really, really important and helpful for that designer.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks for this. I'm going to switch back to slides and I'm going to show you some examples of some of the things we've been talking about. So thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. I want to show you a few things that we were talking about, that Claire and I were talking about, starting with this. This was a book series that an author came to us. He had published these 2 books, and then he published a 3rd book with us. And he asked us if we could make his 2 covers of the first book kind of fit in with the series. So we designed the 3rd cover, and again, you can see that he doesn't have bad ideas, but it does talk about some of the things I mentioned. There's too much going on here. These little pictures are great, but they don't really add a whole lot. I really like the map effect. The author name, I think, is too small. And this is a little hard to read. This is a little better, but they're a little hard to read. So here are the covers that we redesigned. This is The Longest Wooden Railroad, and you can see we kept some of his ideas. We kept the map idea. I liked that. But then we picked just one image and made it stand out a little bit. This is a tower, fire tower that figured prominently in Tahoe of the North, and this, of course, is the wooden railroad. So those were really fun covers to do. And the other thing I want to show you is what a PDF cover file looks like. Now this is a file that is ready to go to the printers, except we haven't masked the lines yet. But this dotted line up here is actually going to be the edge of the book. What you see over here is the bleed that Claire was talking about. So the image has to extend beyond the edge so that if the trimming is off at all, you'll still see image and not just white. So you can see on this one, the title is large. We wanted to make sure that it didn't look like a memoir or anything. So Claire included this thing, a novel, up here. The author had a lot on the back page. She had an excerpt from the book here. She has a book description here, and she has some accolades and blurbs here. But you can see her spine lines, which will be turned off for printing. You can see her website, our imprint, and eventually the retail price will go there. This probably wasn't quite ready to go when we finished it. We leave the barcode blank because when we upload it, we ask them to put a barcode in. So that is pretty much it on covers, and let's move on to the exciting field of metadata. Now, metadata is a term you'll find a lot in the process, and it scares a lot of people, but it's simply the information about your book. And as a self-publisher, that information comes from you. So you need to, at the beginning of the publishing process, create a metadata sheet and keep the metadata consistently. Now, here are some things you're going to need to keep. Obviously, book title and subtitle, and author name. For both of these, though, make sure that you record them as they actually are and use them that way everywhere you enter information. So if your book has an ampersand in it and you use an ampersand, use that every time. Don't spell out the word "and" in the book. The same with your author name. Instead of being James E. Lee, and you call your author name James Lee, use it that way every time. Use your author name and your book title and subtitle the same every place. That's why it's important to have it recorded on a metadata sheet. You're going to have to get an ISBN. You can buy an ISBN at Bowker's, which is the agency that governs it in the United States. I think they're $125 each, or you can buy 10 for $250. That changes sometimes, but those are the current numbers I have. Some publishers, myself included, will supply the author with an ISBN. That means that we are the publisher of record. So you need to remember, if you get a free ISBN through KDP or Ingram Spark, and I think they both offer free ones, that they will then be the publisher of record. And there's still a little prejudice about that out there. So I would be careful of having one, especially if you're selling your book in a bookstore, having Kindle Direct Publishing be the publisher or Ingram Spark be the publisher. You can do it, just consider what the ramifications are of that. And also with KDP, there might be some restrictions on distribution, so just make sure you know that before you go that way. The other number you need to consider is a Library of Congress number. This is a number that makes it easier for librarians to find your book, but I also think it's kind of nice and prestigious to have one on your copyright page. You can obtain one at Library of Congress, LOC.gov, I think. They are free, but you will need to send them a copy of your book when you're done. When you fill out the Library of Congress form, you're going to need to have an ISBN already, so make sure you get that information. Okay, another thing for your metadata sheet are going to be your book details. You want to keep track of the size, the page count, and that is the actual count, not just the paginated pages, your publication date, also any information you enter anywhere about your book. your keywords, your book description, your target audience, and your retail price. Keep a list of all that information. If you have different book descriptions or keywords in different places, write down what you have in the different fields and where they are, so you have that information easily available. So that is all there is to metadata. Get a list, keep track of it, use it consistently. There's a link to a metadata sheet that you can download to get started, and I'll give you a resource for that at the end. Okay, let us talk about printing and distribution. For most self-publishing authors, print on demand is going to be the way to go. So there are two main print-on-demand printers, as I've mentioned before, Kindle Direct Publishing or Ingram Spark. To publish your book with either one, you're going to have to set up an account and then upload the two files we talked about, the cover and the interior. You're going to enter the data that you have on your metadata sheet. You're going to set the retail price and the distribution parameters. To set the retail price, they have online tools. Both of these sites have calculators that you can use to help you figure out what your retail price will be, what your royalties will be, and how you can best price your book. But you also want to consider what other books in your genre are priced like. So if you're selling a paperback novel that's 300 pages for $29.95, it's going to be about twice what any other book in your genre is. A book like that should be $15.95, maybe $16.95. So check all those things out. When you upload your files to either one of these sites, you're going to want to choose expanded distribution. That says extended, but it should be expanded. So expanded distribution means that Kindle Direct Publishing, which distributes to Amazon, will also make your book available through Ingram Content Group, and Ingram Spark, which makes your book available through Ingram Content Group, will also make your book available to Amazon. So there are good reasons to do this. That's kind of a larger discussion right now, but just for now, remember whichever one you pick, choose expanded distribution on them. Now for Ingram, you have some options. You can set your sales discount, which is the amount that the bookseller would buy your book for, at somewhere between 40 and 55%. I recommend 55%. That gives the booksellers the price they want. It doesn't give you as big a royalty, but it gives them the price they want and makes it more likely that they will stock them. But you also must be sure to make the book returnable. So you need to know, those are the two parameters that bookstores will require. And you don't have those options on KDP, but you do have them on Ingram. So that's what I would recommend for those two. You're going to be able to order publisher copies, which are the copies you will have to distribute at readings or events. So you can buy a book for maybe $4, let's say, and if the retail price is $15, all the royalties stay with you. All the difference stays with you. You're not paying that sales discount. You can also distribute them through your website the same way. But I want you to know that you don't have to. The distribution will be set up. These are just some options that you have for getting your book out in the world. Let's talk about ebooks for a moment. First thing I want you to know, some authors just get an ebook done. That's really a big thing these days, to just publish an ebook. And that's fine, but honestly, it's not much of a shortcut. You still have to put the work into the editing, the cover design, and all those things that are actually going to sell your book. So if you're just making an ebook, just remember that it's not a problem, but it's also not as much of a shortcut as you might think it is. Now, I want you to remember also that a PDF is not an ebook. So a PDF is a form by which you can deliver something electronically, and it can be transferred to an e-reader, but a true ebook has reflowable text. So you know how if you're reading it on your Kindle, you can make it bigger when you're tired, as I often do. You can make it smaller, you can change the font, you can change the background color. That is really what an ebook is. So there are several different formats for ebooks. .mobi is Amazon's proprietary format for ebooks. That's what you'll download on a Kindle reader. EPUB you can use for Barnes & Noble Nook and most other readers. But some people also have a Word doc, a .docx. You can upload those to Smashwords and other places that allow you to distribute ebooks. So I want to talk a minute about how you get this ebook. Like with print books, you can find programs online to make ebooks, programs that will convert them. You can learn to code and code a Word document and then run it through a program to convert it to the MOBI or the EPUB files. But honestly, it's pretty inexpensive to have somebody make one for you. So, if you want a clean ebook, find somebody who does that for a living and let them do it. This is the last step, and it's a little bit like a chicken and egg thing. Marketing doesn't necessarily come first, but you shouldn't wait till your book is published to start with it. I'm going to give you some low-hanging fruit right now, some things that you should be doing while your book is in the process of being published. And these are easy things to get started. You want to create and populate an Amazon and a Goodreads author page. Now, both of these are book distributors. Amazon, of course, we're all familiar with. Goodreads is a place that readers go to find new books quite frequently. They have the ability for the author to create a page. You need to do this. This is a place where you're going to be using your author picture, your book details. Some of them you can put videos up on. Once you set them up, you shouldn't have to do a lot more. You'll want like a picture of your book, the front of your book, and all those things. But do be sure and update them if you have some great new editorial reviews or something like that. You want to create either or a website, an author website, or a Facebook page. And I want you to remember that your storefront, whether it's your website or your Facebook page, is your author brand. So you want it to be polished and good looking, but I will tell you it doesn't have to be extensive. These days we're leaning more towards Facebook pages, but you can have a pretty simple one, 5 or 6 pages that has, your book details about the author, a book description, some favorable reviews for your book, and ordering information. I recommend for a website that you use your name if you can, if it's available, because if you write another book, you don't just want a website that has the title of your book on it. Facebook page is a great way to interact with potential readers, and again, is your brand. So if you have a Facebook page for your book, many authors do, make sure that it's polished and up to date. Both these places are great avenues for supplemental information about the book and the author. So if you haven't been able to put something in the book that you want to include, for instance, color images, because you wanted a black and white interior, this is a place where you can post some of that information about your book. So again, these are things you can get up and running as your book is being published. The other thing I want you to think about early in the process is exactly who your audience is. Now, nothing makes me crazier than when an author says to me, well, my book is for everyone. You need to identify your audience by age, gender, demographics, perhaps work, whatever is out there, whatever helps you figure out who your prime reader is going to be, your ideal reader. The more you have a niche, the better off you're going to be. So if you can neck it down and say, this is for this group of this age, of this occupation, then it's easier to target your marketing at those groups of people. Because what you're going to want to do is find and engage with an online community. Now, online communities are nothing more than congregations of people. So you want to find that group that is interested in the things that readers of your book would be interested in. Now, social media, I know, is a pain for a lot of authors. They don't love this idea, but I would suggest that you pick something. You're either going to write a blog, or you're going to tweet, or you're going to populate a Facebook page. Pick 1 or 2 things and start doing them well. I have really enjoyed Instagram and Facebook. Those are my 2 things. I write a blog, but I'm not real active on it. I try and keep it updated, but I'm, post every couple weeks or something. Find something you like, master it, and stick with that initially. you're going to target those audiences with similar interests, and you're going to find them, and you're going to get online, you're going to join the groups, and you are going to read and comment on what other people are saying about things. Nothing's worse than an author getting on a Facebook page and saying, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. The rule of thumb is about 80% not talking about buying your book, and 20% you can slip a little sales talk in there. So consider, creating kind of a social media presence. It's not hard. I always think it's important to read and comment kindly on what other people are doing. You can make yourself a target, you can stir up controversy, but I think you will be remembered more if you are kind and generous to other people. So that's the idea with the online communities. When you are publicizing your book, start local. So you're online, you're doing this, but once your book is published, start with local events. You can aim at Oprah, you can aim at something much bigger, but kind of work it out locally. When you have events, be imaginative. Think beyond readings. Think about what you can do to really engage people in the topic of your book, to engage potential readers. I always suggest, if you're having readings or events, that you team up with other authors. So having 2 or 3 authors present something, say you're all mystery writers and you can present a panel on, how you come up with characters or how you develop characters. But if you team up with other people, you have the potential for engaging a larger audience too. Presumably the other authors' friends and families will come, and maybe they're not familiar with you as an author, but they have the potential to be readers. Also, when you're talking about newspapers and magazines, particularly local ones, try and pitch stories, not book reviews. So the news is not, I've released a book. The news is, I'm a crime writer, I wrote this book about a true crime that happened here, or based on a true crime that happened here years ago. Here's the real story behind it. Your book review, you want book reviews, and that's great. But if you want some wider exposure, I would definitely consider how you're going to approach newspapers and magazines with interesting ideas that are sort of tangential to the fact that you wrote a book. You slip the book in there, but the story is what they're going to run. So that is the low-hanging fruit of marketing. There's far, far more about that. We'll devote other sessions to that, but that's all I'm going to talk about now. Let me give you a few resources before I sign off this part. You can look at videos and downloads at luminarypress.com/author-resources/. We have videos there, and we're putting new ones up all the time. They're tutorials, mostly for how to do some of the things I've been talking about. You can also find it on our Luminary Press YouTube channel. You can get a free book and a publishing consultation just by visiting www.luminarypress.com. There's an online calendar. You can sign up for a time, and I will call you and we will talk about your publishing process.
Thanks for watching that presentation. If you follow the guidelines I've laid out, you can avoid the fate of authors whose books get rejected for quality reasons, and that will give you and your book a real advantage. I know you can do it. This seminar should give you a great foundation and help you avoid pitfalls along the way. Remember, if you decide to tackle publishing on your own, you're going to have to be prepared to invest both time and money. So plan for that and do it wisely. Publishing is not an overnight task. Isn't your book worth the time it will take to do it right? If you follow the 6 steps I've laid out, you should be able to create a professional book that you'll be proud of. Get help with the things you can't do, and don't take shortcuts. Remember, they can seem attractive at the moment, but they'll lead to problems later on. But if you find you can't do it yourself, don't settle for publishing a book that might be rejected for things you could easily make better with the right kind of help. At Luminary Press, we offer full publishing services, and we also provide a la carte services such as cover design and interior layout. If you're interested in finding out more about what we do, or even if you just need some advice, feel free to reach out. If you click the link below, you'll be sent to an application page where you can fill out a quick application before scheduling your call with me. And don't worry about a hard sell. I'm much better at making books than I am at sales. But as I've done with many other authors, I'll be happy to help you figure out what's best for your project. Thanks again for watching. I'm Patricia Marshall, and I'll look forward to talking with you again.